As a longtime fan of turn-based strategy games and a devout follower of war, I've been on the lookout, hoping to find a new game for me to show off my strategic mind for dismantling my opponent on the battlefield. So in my decrepit old eyes, happened upon Warside, a new retro pixelated strategy war game. With some clear roots of the classic turn-based games of my youth, all I can think of is, can this game really quench my thirst for warfare? So as you can imagine, being the channel that labels itself the kings of indie games, it was our job to dive into Warside and see whether this game is worth buying. Can it match the levels of some other games in the genre? Let's jump into it. Let's start off with the good. And one of the most important things of any game is obviously the gameplay. And I gotta say, I kinda love it. The basic gameplay loop is pretty standard for most other strategy games. Each unit has positives and negatives. Tanks are good against most vehicles but stink against any air unit. Recon cars are good against infantry but stink against everything else. And there's kind of this real strategy component to it, very similar to like playing chess. So if you like playing chess, then you're probably gonna like this type of a game. But I gotta say, if you know what you're doing, then it's gonna be pretty easy. Most often my strategies are, well, whoever buys the most tanks can most often win. But even that being the case, you can't just bully your way through every game. You kind of have to be smart in your approach. And I gotta say, I was getting hit with some real nostalgia, and tears are coming to my eyes thinking about Advanced Wars back in the old days. Back when I was a kid and I used to get destroyed by all these computers, I just couldn't understand why I stunk so bad. But now as a full-grown adult, I am literally dominating my enemies and I kind of feel bad for them. And you might notice I will make a lot of comparisons to Advanced Wars because pretty much this game is nearly identical to that. But one thing I think this game does have a step above what Advanced Wars did is that they actually have units that are different per faction, which makes each group feel a little different. Firstly, the fact that they've added new units that are completely different from the old games, but actually are things that I thought were actually missed opportunities from Advanced Wars era. For example, new units like sniper teams or medics or ATVs are really awesome additions. They create a brand new meta into the basic gameplay loop, and I wish they actually added this to the other Advanced Wars games that came out decades ago. I mean, there's roughly 4 different Advanced Wars games and a remake, and no one ever thought about having sniper teams added. And I also think the specialized units are actually really cool within themselves. For example, we get units like the Rhino and the Giant. Bikers, I think, are a really cool idea for themselves, and I think for the most part, each of these units play a role in the game. Sometimes certain units can be overpowered. For example, the Rhino can literally collide units into buildings and erase them completely, or just throw them into the water. And I probably would lose my mind if I actually had some overpowered tank that was just thrown into the river and just disappeared completely. I would probably throw my controller against the wall. And even the power-ups are not just copy and paste jobs from other games. Most often, you probably would see a lot of copy and paste jobs from Advanced Wars because it was probably one of the most popular turn-based games we had on the Game Boy Advance. To be honest with you, most of the power-up abilities are actually different. Some of them are similar with having a group of units being defense boosted. Some are really cool with having the ability to kind of have a lightning strike attack certain units within a certain area. And others are pretty much the same that we've seen before, with having basically a power shutdown or EMP blast that turns off units' attacks for an entire turn. Now granted, I will say some of these abilities are kind of paper dry and don't really fit certain character creations, which I will address in my bad, but I gotta say, at least it's not just a copy and paste job. The devs did really take the time and think of some different abilities here, which I do appreciate. If you were creating a war game, what unit do you think would be the best to have in a turn-based strategy game like this one? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like this type of content, drop a thumbs up and subscribe to support the channel. We also have our memberships on, so you can become a supporter of the channel by becoming part of the Marsman crew. Now let's jump into the bad. And with the good, let's talk about the bad. And right off the bat, I'm gonna be as nice as possible, and I'm gonna say the story is very minimal. Am I expecting this game to have the storytelling abilities of The Last of Us to make me cry and sob at the screen? No. But I will say this is as paper, cookie cutter type of story that you could get. You're playing as Lieutenant Jackson and you're learning the ropes, and all of a sudden you get attacked by neighboring groups, and they're apparently having some sort of research technology of a super powered weapon that they could use against everybody. And it's your job to go find that super weapon and to take it out of commission. And along the way, you're fighting off against all these different factions that are preventing you from doing what you're supposed to be doing. Very minimal. But I think what makes matters worse is really the story writing between the different character dynamics and the things that happen in these different missions kind of are not that great. Sure, do I appreciate the fact that there are some interesting missions like delivering scientists out of an area? Of course. But for the most part, it feels like there is really not much character. And unfortunately, when you don't really have that great of a story, or at least minimalist story, with characters that are kind of paper flats and not really unique, then it kind of just makes the confrontations between certain units feel not that important. Am I expecting each character to be goofy and wacky? No. This is a war game, I will be honest, but at the same time, you also can have a little more fun with it. These characters are definitely going to be based in military personnel, so they can have certain traits about them. But I also can say that you can pull off some really interesting dialogue between certain people based if their character arcs are different. As I mentioned earlier, I will make some comparisons to one of my favorite turn-based strategy games in Advance Wars. Advance Wars was a war turn-based strategy game that was mirroring all these different groups and commanders that led these different units. But each commander has their own character arcs. They have their own personalities. They have their own way of talking. You had all these different factions that had all these important things about them, the way in which they acted. You had Orange Star, which was the main group that was basically mirroring the United States. You had Blue Moon that was mirroring a Russian or Eastern European army. Green Earth was this European-based military that had a lot of kind of mirroring to Germany and in the way even the units look. The point I'm trying to make with all this is that you're not really getting much character development or uniqueness with any of these characters that we're playing as. Even the soundtrack, and I'm not going to really rag on Warside's soundtrack because I think it's unique. They do have some rock albums in the background that kind of give off some different vibes, but it's very plain. Advance Wars had unique tracks based on the different character. One of my favorite characters is Drake from Green Earth, and he had some sort of pirate seafaring song because that was his ability. He was a good naval combat officer. You had Grit, who was a literal cowboy who had cowboy music in the background as you played as him. And it made each of these characters unique to what their soundtrack and their units could do. And trust me, I'm not trying to be that guy and be a jerk and just start saying, well, this is not Advance Wars and that's why it stinks. I'm not saying that. But for a game that takes a lot of its influence from that classic title, it kind of feels like they missed out on the really good opportunity to create their own variants of these characters and the different dynamics they have. And someone that is a fan of Advance Wars does appreciate the fact that these devs took the ideas from the past and said, you know what, let's make some additions to it. I just think they had a missed opportunity to really take what the old game had and build upon it even further. So when it comes to Warside, I do have some good and some bad. If you like turn-based games that are based in war, then you're gonna love this. This is a game that has a lot of basics down pat. They don't screw up a lot when it comes to its basic gameplay. The units are really fun with 30 plus different units you can play as, from land, air, the sea, and they've even added more units than any other Advanced Wars game had before. They even created some uniqueness when it comes to different factions having their own specialized units. And I'll be honest, the units they have in this game actually are better than the units they had in Advanced Wars. And I do like the fact that some of these specials are actually different in their own way. Unfortunately, the characters are really flat, and so is the story. And because of this, it does limit the possible growth that this game could have. And overall, I think Warside is a fun game. And for that, I'm going to give Warside a 7 out of 10 and a Marsman Gaming mixed bag accolade. I think this game has some really good positives to it. And if you love the basic mechanics of turn-based warfare games, then you're going to love this. But if you're expecting this to be the same level as some of the classics of Advanced Wars from back in the day, you're going to be a little disappointed. But if this game gets a sequel, a DLC, or an expansion of any kind, the devs can really take the positives they have here and keep running with it. This has some good legs to it, and I guarantee you if you like turn-based games, you're gonna have a fun time. But what do you think about Warside? Do you think it'll be a smash hit for the turn-based genre? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like this type of content, drop a thumbs up and subscribe to support the channel. If you like turn-based games, we've done reviews on Advance Wars Remake as well as Wargroove 2, and you can check those out in the end screen. Until next time, this is Marsman signing off. Game on.